Okay, my name is Deirdre McDermott. I'm from Ireland, and I'm AdCom VP. But just to pick up on the comment that Mario said, I think that we mustn't forget the National Committee role in organising the Sites and Monuments Day. That's how it's always happened certainly in Ireland. I don't think there's a particular structure. The theme is set by the Scientific Council, and thereafter a great deal of collaboration goes on individually in countries, and lots of ingenuity comes out. So, but we don't have, it never has been, except for your own experience, operationalized in that manner, and that's very impressive. Thank you.
Thank you, Deirdre.
Stacey, Peter Phillips from Australia, if I can just add something. I think last year was different because the theme was actually directly related to the emerging professionals. And this is why we asked the EPWG to operationalise it. This year, the theme is being managed by the Cultural Landscapes ISC. Patricia O'Donnell is the lead for that, and I'm sure she would be delighted to hear from you with your ideas. But the Cultural Landscapes Committee will be producing a kind of thematic paper with ideas for producing it, and then it's up, as Deirdre said, to the national committees and the ISCs and anybody else to take it forward and produce their own events. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Soraya Genan from Portugal. I would like to thank your presentation. Very nice to see the use of technologies. That's really a good support for the Commons group. And I would like to say that I presented to Grellen my proposal for the next European group in Portugal, so you are welcome. And I have this, your intervention in the first day, because in fact I work in university, and it's a very good pleasure to receive you, and I would like to add a workshop if you want to. So I propose this here. And I would like to add that in this idea of emerging professional, I heard about experience, but what about the education and formation? How do you schedule this? From first cycle, we can have students with a lot of interest in heritage and cultural heritage, and second cycle, another step, third cycle, well, and then experience, of course, but don't forget the education, and because there's a lot of difference between countries even on that. So it's very important to take care on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And if I may, I'd like to address both those points. So the first is to say a big thank you. And I will be sure to pass on the details for the proposed session during the Europe Group Portugal, the Europe Group meeting in Portugal to our regional coordinator, Gregor, who unfortunately we can't seem to hear at the moment, but I know that he's very keen to make contact and further develop the agenda for that. With regards to the definition as it stands, I guess the short answer to many of the queries that have been raised and we have found ourselves tackling over the past little while is that we, as a working group, we've sort of been in existence for over or just about a year or so, and the essential rationale was to shift the thinking from a particular age more to the stage of one's overall professional development. So with regards to the definition as it stands, it is a starting point, and the identification of 15 years has been intended as a general guideline. How and whether that might take on further development or refinement is something that we'll definitely be talking about over the next little while to address the different, I think, stages of educational, experience that a person might bring. I'm not sure, Gideon, if you've...
Maybe just one remark to Clara's point, which is that we we include the period of education in the 15 years, which is a bit different from the definition you refer to. And though, as mentioned before, the majority of present EPs are coming from the field of architecture, that is not necessarily so. And we were provided with some examples that show that sometimes people spend 4, 5, 6, even 8 years at the educational period before they start the career. And we didn't want, I mean, the main intention was to break away from both definitions of being a student, which is a problem in its own, and the age issue, which is again a problem in its own, because some can start studying at the age of 18, while others can start at 28 or 35 and still be emerging professionals at a much later stage. So in order to escape all these specifics, the main proposal was to look into the educational period and the beginning of the career as one period and not distinguish between the two. And then, because of the variety of educational background, to have a period which will be defined with this 15 years. But first of all, it's still a draft within the ISC's bylaws, which is being looked into at present. So there is nothing definitive here, and it is certainly not meant to say that you have to wait 15 years until you can be accepted as an expert member according to the criteria of the various ISCs. So in many cases, maybe after 5, 6 years, you can be already accepted by your ISC as an expert member according to its own criteria, because each and every ISC has its own definition. But again, it's in a very early stage. Nothing is too definitive here, and we are still looking into it because there are many comments coming from. By the way, some say that 15 is too little because it includes the educational period. Sometimes it comes from people which are. We do have some people in ECOMOS which are not very pro this whole EPWG initiative, so they would like to keep the emerging professionals away for as long as possible. So there are all kinds of attitudes. So this is the present proposal included in the ISC's bylaws, but it's certainly not the final one.
Yeah, okay, thanks. I totally understand that a lot of thinking went into this. I just talking from a personal experience point of view, like, I'm just a little bit afraid that it's a bit too unclear to, especially because we have really different educational backgrounds in ECOMOS, to really say 15 years, and this is also because architecture education takes maybe sometimes up to 8 years. Yeah, I'm not an architect, and I think it would be a bit more clear to just relate to the professional experience. And also, I know that the EP initiative is like created to work for the advantage of young people wanting to engage with ECOMOS, but sometimes it can also work the other way around, because, and we've talked about it in the group, that especially maybe the older or more experienced EPs feel sometimes like they don't want to be EPs anymore, but they are received as, perceived as EPs. So it can also, it's a bit of a double-edged sword. You want to be like, perceived as a full expert also within ECOMOS, but then you are giving the label of EP, and sometimes you're giving like some kind of assistant job, and whereas you've already had more than 10 years of experience, and that's a problem. So we have to, I think, keep discussing it and keep working on it. And just from my point of view, I think the UN consultancy guidelines, they maybe are a valid document to be considered in this definition. Thanks.
Thanks, Clara. So I think the main takeaway from that is that the UN documents, exactly as you say, will provide a useful reference, and we realize that in the group at the moment, a variety of backgrounds and profiles are represented, and it's a case of talking through some of those issues to understand what's most relevant for the group now and potentially for emerging professionals in the future as well. So thank you. We'll I think that's definitely a useful reference and food for thought. Are there any further questions or feedback?
Yeah, feedback. Hi, my name is Jiyeon from E-commerce Korea. So thank you for the presentations which you made, and then I think it has been great since you have worked on really hard to gather all the EPs from throughout the world. But first of all, it seems like although you have made efforts to gather EPs for each country, but it seems like the EPWG for each country needs a mentor, so which means mentor from the national committee members. So I think EPWG, you should request all the national committee members to designate one mentor from national committee, so that those experience the connections between the national committee and EPWG for each nation can be more interactive and connected. I think those should be also done.
Thank you for your feedback. Yeah, so I guess the underlying logic again to the EPWG is that the working group or the membership base of EPs within a given NC, for instance, is as integrated with the or within the NC itself, meaning that that exchange and dialogue is inherent to its existence, so that it's not necessarily viewed as a separate group or a separate entity, but that any or all in quotation marks established members or more senior members engage with the group. So this doesn't necessarily have to happen through one person, but it can happen as a whole.
So it doesn't have to be one mentor. I think it could be like 2 or 3 mentors.
Yep.
But I think EPWG should officially request national committee members, national committees to designate like at least 3 mentors or
Yeah.
2 or 3 mentors.
Yeah.
I think there should be some like disagreements in pipeline.
Yeah, just to give a bit of a understanding, we've gathered different. If you saw that there are data of what has happened to the different national committees and international scientific committees, a lot of the committees have a different interpretation of how it should be done. And of course, these are not something that we can police or do ourselves. It's the responsibility is actually in the national committee. These are information that I'm not sure how it can be further clarified, because there will be bylaws that will be created for each national committee. What I do know, and we've gathered it from yesterday, that in Austria they have this very successful mentorship that happens with younger professionals and older professionals, and they come together and create I think this monitoring processes for the World Heritage Sites. So it's part of the solution. I don't know if it was an EP related activity, but it's part of the system, right? That there is a mentor, and then he becomes a trainee for these younger professionals in ECOMOS, and everyone becomes part of a solid group that will eventually be managing or doing the reporting for the World Heritage Site. So that's one way, but that's the interpretation of one NC.
It would be great if you can share those experiences and case studies, because some national committees, they might not be aware of how to help EPs. Although they have EPs, they might not have the idea of how we should help EPs to expand their activities. So that's why I think you should share your experience. I think the experiences which we shared yesterday should be released to all the national committees, so that they can have certain idea of how they can help their EPs for their own, own traditional country level.
Thank you, and absolutely, point taken. And something which we didn't highlight over the course of this presentation is that all of the examples which we have captured in the PowerPoint slides will actually be fed into a larger document that is aimed at providing examples where EPs have engaged with their various NCs and ISCs as tools or yes, so essentially as tools that can be more widely shared and developed upon, I think, as well. So absolutely, the answer is that that is something that we are working on, and we hope to provide an update on over the following year. I saw another hand go up.
I think
Another couple.
Now, yeah. Okay, maybe Ilaria first.
Ilaria.
And then, we go this way. I saw second.
Okay, mine is a comment both to Clara and to the intervention of our Korean colleague, and they are related. So there's this issue about the 15 years of education and working experience that somehow has an impact on the activities we might be involved in, as Clara was saying, like as EP, you might be asked to participate in a certain way, while as expert member of a national committee or international scientific committee, you might be involved in a different way. In order to make a distinction between the different involvements that there can happen, let's say, we could create a more solid structure of engagement, and then something we were discussing also during these days. And what I mean is, for instance, mentorship programs, as we were talking about. There are some very good examples, as we said, in Austria, but also the International Scientific Committee on Cultural Heritage and Tourism as a well-defined program. Maybe what we could do is to ask national committees and international scientific committees to report back on an annual basis about this kind of activities, because I know that it can work differently from country to country due to cultural reasons or others. But maybe giving the structure could help us to help also national committees and international scientific committees to develop these kind of programs. And another thing we were discussing this morning, for instance, it would be good to have a shadow EP member during missions, as our colleague from Canada was saying. Well, this might be, how can I say, request? Yes, a strategy. I mean, requested more and more, but this should be should come from. How can I say? Maybe it could be one of our recommendations. Yeah, let's say this way.
Thank you, Larry.
Okay, so.
I think I saw Ege's hand go up a while ago.
And then 4.
Thank you. Just to kind of clarify, there is a question in the annual report on whether boards have our countries' national committees. And every national committee and every ISC is obliged to fill this report out year on year. It's an annual report, and there's a question specifically about the EP representative. So you're in there already, and it's a great idea that you should request that you are that you're included in the agenda, as an automatic thing. This year, Stacey and I discussed this, that your recommendations will have a space to be read out at ADCOM. In other meetings, because of the timings, it might have gone, your recommendations might have gone to regional meetings and then on to the national committee agenda and then to ADCOM. But here we're actually suggesting that because your meeting is after the national committee meeting, that opportunity doesn't exist. So you're going straight into ADCOM with your recommendations. So make those requests and make sure you have the voice and ask the people who are setting the agenda year on year. It has been me and my colleagues for the last 3 years, but you know, the elections for ADCOM happen tomorrow. So there'll be other people who are carrying that mantle, and you need to tell them your expectations. Thank you.
Thank you, Deidre.
Hi, Cyril from Austria. Scope, they have an interest in their people come together because they want to do something specific. And following that, we define who can become member of that ISC. Here, with all the wishes, is that you want to be represented, you want to come in, you want to be part of it, but what do you actually want? Is this an educational thing? Is this you want to gain the experience to become a more expert member? So maybe we could change the thing that emerging professional or become an educational thing within ECOMOS, the, let's say, ECOMOS Academy, that people are members who want to then gain more experience, then hook up into scientific programs, into academic kind of things. Maybe then the definition of who can become a member becomes a more easily tackleable question.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm really glad to come after you because mine is kind of relevant. It's really interesting to point out that this is a dynamic process. I mean, we grow up, time goes by, and our position changes in life. I just wanted to say quickly that the SDGs group has a great EP. Ilaria is our Sustainable Development Goals EP, and I think we're going to have a subgroup. We're looking forward to having it grow, and we're really learning from you already. Thank you for that. And I'm very interested in this blurred gap, like, the blurring of lines, which has been already touched on before. And I'm curious how the EPs feel about, do you feel better being defined as a distinct identity, or actually, what should be the balance between being integrated, mainstreamed into just another regular ECOMOS member with the expertise? Because, yeah, I think that's my question. Thank you.
Yeah. So I think, well, there'd be a number of answers to that question. Well, once again, my short answer to that is that the rationale for this initiative, from my perspective anyways, and I think that's remained consistent over the past 1.5 years that we have existed, and it's been that the first step has been to simply identify and activate a network of people who are potentially interested in this initiative. How it might take a form after that is something that we're very much still in the process of, well, as we can see, thinking through and further defining. So I guess the outcome of it is that exactly as we had identified through the slides that were presented by Audrey on the survey, which we conducted, is that there's a range of backgrounds, and in tandem with that, of course, a range of aspirations and expectations depending on one's background. So we don't have a clear answer at the moment, but it's definitely, that's your point is a valid one, and one which we will be noting down as feedback to further complement our discussion over the next year.
I saw Christoph raising his hand, and Sana wants to say something as well. But taking back to what our colleague from Austria said, and now just reflecting on it, perhaps it's not needed to have an emerging professional definition, as you wanted to ask something about definitions, but maybe it's a mentorship program that people want, right? It's like having that engagement between learning from a more experienced member to a young member to explain what do you know, for example, this is my first the General Assembly, I and some other emerging professionals were asking, what is the difference between the ADCOM meeting and the Scientific Council meeting and these different meetings? I did not have an idea, because no one tells what is the differences. What do you actually discuss? And then one example, I know that I have a voting right, but I don't know when I need to vote. I have no idea on these kinds of small things that maybe it's a mentorship rather than a title of emerging that is needed. But that's a personal perspective. And of course, we need to discuss this as a group, what is the most important things. Christoph, Sana wants to say something.
Yeah, I think it's very complex, the subject, because we have been talking about that for 1.5 years, and we still didn't find the right definition. I think we can still talking a lot with in age, in experience, and the different perspective. For example, a PhD candidate is sometimes PhD take 10 years, but you are still a student. So there is it's complex. But I think that's what I feel is that anytime when there is a transition, it's more complicated. So I feel like if this group was a transition, maybe between young or emerging professional, like a student one between 3 and 5, and practically an expert recognized member. So I feel that this is so how we can pass from this to this. There is the work that we are doing, and I think maybe, I don't know, but I feel in this transition phase. So, yeah.
I think Christoph wants to.
Thank you. I want to pick up on a comment that Cyril made, and I'm going to use the word you just used, Sana, transition, because I think, I've always been fascinated by this obsession with age and this obsession with experience, because some people do the same thing for 30 years and still don't get it right. So it's, I think it's important, and my own experience is that I started getting involved in ECOMOS in 1997 when I was 22, and in the previous millennia. And this is, and there was no structure, there was no possibility, there was quite a few obstacles. But the one thing that allowed me to have a place was the interaction with specific individuals, and age had nothing to do with it. It was all about personalities. And we were very fortunate in Canada that we had quite a few players of that nature who are no longer with us, but they played that crucial role. So the mentorship I appreciate, and the role of mentorship in transition. But the point that I want to pick up on Cyril's previous intervention is the matter of thinking and science. So could you flip back to the slide that describes the objective of your?
Yep, sure.
Yeah. Because between that statement on, what was it? I really don't know. There you go. Stop.
Yep,
yeah.
Got it.
Maintain ECOMOS' scientific relevance for future generations. That is the #1 issue someone needs to tackle now. And that is the one thing that we're asking our members to focus on for our organization. So we've been working for quite a few years now to focus on this idea of relevance. So yes, we have members who participate in the Stone Committee, Wood Committee, and so on. But our priorities as a national committee reflect the sense of relevance in today's policies and in the future development of our profession. And that is particularly crucial, that you have an exceptional body of 500-odd individuals who are connected, motivated, who have this sense of transition. And I would say that you have to embrace that transition to make that difference for the future. So that emphasis on the scientific relevance, which may be quite distinct from the conversations you might individually have in ISCs, is, I can foresee, one of the biggest contributions you can make.
Thank you, Christoph. There's one more at the back, and then I'd like to pass it to Gideon.
Hi, Doug Comer, president of US ECOMOS. US Ecomos has an international exchange program. As a matter of fact, I see some of our alumni here, our illustrious alumni in the audience, and it's for emerging professionals. So a problem we encounter is that we have to find sponsors for participants in the IEP, the International Exchange Program, and they have to pay money for this. So finding it, you know, so many things come down to funding. We have to identify a need, and sometimes when we identify a need, we can't find an emerging professional from an appropriate country that meets these age qualifications. So, for example, in Peru, we could get funding from the State Department for an exchange program for a 2-year period. But it's very difficult to find people from Peru who are fluent in English so that they can work in the United States with an appropriate organization. That takes time. It's not just how long they've been to school and how long they practice. They have to have the linguistic skills and that sort of thing. We could, for example, get the chief archaeologist for Machu Picchu to go to the Peabody Institute to do research there that would benefit both Machu Picchu and the Peabody. But he's almost 40. He's not that much older than the limit. So I think that this is something else we really need to consider, you know, and that is if you're going to move ahead, and you really should, obviously, maintaining US or ICOMOS's scientific relevance for the future generations, that's pivotal. We're going to have to find sources of funding, and the sources of funding are going to be dependent upon finding people that are going to bring something, going to fulfill a need as defined by ICOMOS. So I would be in favor of being a little bit more lax with this age limitation for this very reason. Again, it's not just finishing school, working in your field for a period of time, it's gaining the maturity to be able to go to a different country. That in itself is a skill. So I would encourage more flexibility with this age limitation.
Thank you very much. Gideon?
Just one comment, and in making my comment, I'm going to contradict myself. For many years on the ICOMOS board, we were struggling with various ideas how to encourage EPs, it was called young professionals at the time, to join ICOMOS. And we completely failed for many years. Nothing we thought about was successful until this initiative started. And in my opinion, the fact that this initiative is, again, I'm not very objective, but because I'm involved in it, but I think that it is a very successful one if you look at the results of a year and a half. And we have to take it into proportion, first of all. It's a year and a half. It's not like that we have this EP working group you know, struggling for 20 years, and where are the results? It's a very new initiative. And the point behind this initiative was to let this group of people who is standing or sitting today in front of you, and many others around the world which are joining us now, to determine their own needs. And not for us elders, so to speak, to make decisions for them. We are here to facilitate what they are defining as their goals, what they are defining as the ways they want to get involved, what they are defining as how they want to be mentored, with whatever they are defining in the way they want to move forward. And we are just assisting them. We are like participating on a monthly basis in their Zoom meetings, which is a new experience for us as well, and trying to help them take forward their own ideas. And this is something that we have to remember. They are deciding on their own interests. They are deciding on their own initiatives. They are deciding how they want to move forward. They are suggesting how to be involved, and we are just trying to respond to that in the best way possible, taking into consideration the limits of ICOMOS, which we also have to remember. It's a voluntary organization. We have no powers to force anybody to mentor anybody. We have no powers to force anybody to devote time to emerging professionals. We are still struggling with the majority of national committees and scientific committees who have not even implied last year's General Assembly resolution that they have to nominate an EP. The majority of our ICs are yet to nominate an EP. I'm just mentioning it not because I want to do some shaming or because I want to, I can read you the list of those who haven't appointed anyone, but that's not the point. The point is that we are still struggling with a very first idea of taking this whole idea forward. So without undermining anything mentioned before, and some proposals are of course very significant and very important, we have to take it in the right context of where we are at present and what we need to cope with. And as all of you are very supportive of these initiatives, and the mere fact that you are here shows that, when we come tomorrow to the advisory committee meeting, we have to look for ways to take it forward. We have to look for ways to persuade the majority of our own committees to be engaged with this process. It's not an easy task. We have many members saying, oh, no, ICOMOS used to be an organization of experts. And if we have these young people around us, we will not be considered experts anymore. And there are many people who have this mantra and keep saying that and keep object to some EP initiative based on the desire to remain as they were, a group of experts without allowing any newcomers in, because it will undermine their own scientific, professional, academic, financial, whatever position. So we are struggling with many obstacles, and we still have to complete the first stage, and this is to have the working group composed of members of the majority of NCs and ISCs. So step by step, we'll get there. I'm sure we'll get there, and we have a very energetic group of emerging professionals, some present here, some not so present here, but I just wanted us all to be aware of where we stand and take it in sort of the right proportion at the moment. And the first stage needs to be inclusiveness. We need to get all our ICs and national committees involved in the process. That's the first stage we are still to achieve.
Thank you very much, Gideon. Yeah, we'll just keep an eye on the time. How are we going?
12:20.
Okay, so maybe 1 or 2 at most.
Just to share a little point of view about the identity of the group, the discussion. I think that the EPs, I am reading because I'm not very fluent in English, I read. I think the EPs are not only people seeking to build up interest and expertise, and I think this is very important, and the mentorship is a great idea, but I think that the EPs sometimes, they can share whole new kinds of approach to the theme and share new points of view. In the national committees, in scientific council, in all the spaces that ICOMOS have to discussions, it's very important inside an ancient institution that sometimes could look like a monolithic and closed structure. So I think the EPs are important to change this structure too. I think the EPs are important to transform and improve ICOMOS too, not only to improve the individual career of the EPs, but to the EPs contribute and grow up ICOMOS and yeah, I think it's yes, okay.
Thank you, Jorge. So maybe one more question.
There are 3 last hands, and I hope we can still have last 3 hands very quickly.
So we have a comment, which we can take down the...
Okay.
Carolina.
I'd like Teresa Patricio from Belgium ICOMOS, and I'm also a member of the board.
I'd like to congratulate you for this meeting that you organize here. I think it's very important. And I really think that the EPs can improve e-commerce. And I think one proof of that is that we have a PowerPoint in 2 languages. They really made an effort to communicate. They are using the official languages of e-commerce, but are also using Russian, translating for other languages. And I think this is really very interesting. I'm working in the board with a group about better understanding and trying to translate documents that perhaps we should want to discuss how we can work together, because I think it was really very good. I was really very happy when I saw your first slide in 2 languages. And I think we should try to do the same in all our meetings, at least 2 languages. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, no, only one very short thing is yesterday I was in the meeting and I saw all these very nice and fresh ideas there. So I think I agree with him about maybe this group is the opportunity to, in e-commerce organization, make the focus in the initiatives, ideas, proposals, more than to continue with this categories, divisions, and I think it's more interesting to put the focus in the ideas, more in the categorization about the age or these kind of things. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolina.
Okay, last point.
Yeah, mine is just a comment more than a question, but I think, like, first of all, we need to make it clear also with e-commerce that without emerging professional, e-commerce is going to die. I mean, intergenerational change means sooner or later, you're going to have to allow these people to form themselves within the organization to better understand how it works. And I always find it rather interesting because last year at the General Assembly I was sitting near a very young president of a national committee. And there was a president from another committee, a European committee, who stood up and said, for me, we shouldn't get any member within e-commerce, not only as an emerging professional, within e-commerce, who's not at least 40 years old. And the guy next to me was 42 years old and said, I mean, he was speechless. He was like, how can a person even say this? I mean, and the argument was that if you're not 40, you can't be an expert. But the argument should be, is every e-commerce member an expert, or are we practitioners? Because I think the problem lays in the definition that people use within e-commerce themselves. It's not a congregation or the Illuminati of heritage experts, but it is a congregation of heritage practitioners, that they can exchange ideas, and it should be a pool of more ideas, of continuing this conversation rather than self-defining themselves as the expert. And I think the good part of this working group is that you're showing that it's possible. It's possible to come together independently from the definition of soon-to-be expert or whatever. But on the other sense, I see it at the national level that to a certain stage it crippled us. Because for some national committees, this was the perfect excuse to finally set up the children's table, to finally set up a smaller group where anyone who has controversial voices within the younger generation, you shovel it in there. They don't interact with boards. They don't interact with anyone else who is part of the wider e-commerce group. And this is a little bit deleterious for the at the national level to actually try to do more, because for us, the conversation is down to 0. If you're an emerging professional, you need to report to your emerging professional representative, and then from then on, they take care of all this information, which is, it shows also the unflexibility of the organization in saying, you are our future, and we treasure the fact that as the board wanted emerging professionals to get involved, but it seems the national committees are the one that are a bit more resistant in having actually emerging professionals getting involved. And on the last part, I think what Clara already said and what Ilaria already said is that we really need to find a more qualitative way to define ourselves rather than an age base or a year experience base, because 15 years, I think, is a very good number for certain professions. For other professions, 15 years is a huge amount of time, just for the fact that maybe the fact that you didn't go through a PhD, that you didn't go through certain years of study, cripples you a little bit within the organization. So I think this is the perfect time to try to bring a little bit of change within ICOMOS and see how far we can get with these new ideas.
Thank you, Nicole. So at that, I'd like to thank everyone who's here in person for your attendance, in addition to your queries and feedback. We're very much at a stage where I think we're sort of trying to find that fine balance between maintaining a bird's eye perspective as to why or where this initiative has come from and what's most important, whilst also not getting mired in details of numbers and I guess fairly conventional or closed means of defining ourselves. In addition to that, I'd like to thank everyone who has signed in online. I'm more than aware that we've had our fair share of technical issues this morning, but I would really like to say a big thank you to all of you for all of your input over this past year, and even in contributing to what we've seen on screen. It wouldn't have happened if we didn't have a very a closely connected and a committed team of people who share a common vision. And last but not least, once again, to our presenters for your input and efforts as well.
We'll see you again next year, and we hope that we will have a better definition or better way of refining what we've discussed. Thank you very much.